Well, this U.S. election season is definitely shaping up to be very interesting. We had within the last month, there was the attempt on Donald Trump. And then we also have Joe Biden stepping down from the race. And it looks like Kamala Harris is going to be getting the nomination at the Democratic convention. She's got a lot of support. There's a lot of people within the party that are putting their support. And of course, there's a lot of campaign money also going behind Kamala Harris. Now, what I'm going to be doing is kind of looking at a hypothetical scenario. There's been people that have put out names like, for example, Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, Gavin Newsom, and there's been some speculation. What if something were to switch between now and the convention? What if whatever happens? So I'm going to be looking at some of these charts just to see, does Kamala have this clinched? Is this guaranteed? Now, she's in a really good astrological period. She's in a Rahu mahadasha. And also the eclipses, they did happen on her. They did touch her for our 10th house in her astrology chart. So it's really, she's in a really good astrological period. I was a little bit hesitant because of the sub period she's in, but still she's in a period where she could attain the presidency. And I actually feel when I look at Kamala's chart compared to Trump's chart, I do feel like she has the stronger chart in this election season. But today, what I'm going to be looking at is Hillary Clinton's chart. Now, I know she already came out in X, and she essentially declared her support for Kamala Harris. But what are we going to see in the chart? So that's what I'm going to be looking at now. So for those of you that are interested in this reading, make sure you like and subscribe. I do Vedic sidereal astrology, which is the astrology from ancient India. So it might look a little different. Your sign may be different using this method as well. If you're interested in a personal private reading, check down below for details. Also, I just want to remind you all, these astrological readings, they're for entertainment purposes only. So all these statements about Hillary Clinton in this reading, they're all just my interpretation of the astrological energies, and they're not necessarily factual. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to pull up Hillary's chart for a moment so you all can look at it. Let me pull that up for you all. So one of the things that's interesting about Hillary's chart is she's got a lot of similarities to Kamala, which I find very interesting. So, for example, Rahu being in the first house. Remember, Kamala has Rahu in the first house, debilitated Mars over here, and then even debilitated Sun over here. It's like they have similar charts. In fact, let me pull up Kamala's chart just to show you all. Let's see. Okay, this is Kamala's chart. Look at this. Rahu in the first house, debilitated Mars in the sign of Cancer, debilitated Sun. So this is quite unusual to see this much commonality. But we're going to be looking at the astrological period. Now, they are different ascendants. There are differences there, but I found that kind of interesting. We're going to go pull up Hillary's chart back again. Okay, here's Hillary's chart. Now we're going to be focusing on the mahadasha and the antardasha, and then we'll look at if there's any relevant transits that are happening in Hillary's chart. So she's in a Mars mahadasha. That's what we're going to be talking about first. So Mars, and you'll see Mars is in the third house. It's with Saturn there. So we'll be kind of dissecting that. It rules the 12th house and the 7th house over here. So the 7th and the 12th. So we'll be kind of unpacking that. But remember, the Mars period is going to be more of the general energy, just like Kamala. She's in a Rahu Mahadasha, but remember, that's the general energy. The sub period is usually the more intense, acute energy. So that's why I do really get focused on the antardasha. Now, the antardasha that Hillary's in is Rahu, and Rahu's in the first house. So we're going to unpack that as well because this is intense. This shows a lot of ambition that's happening during this time period. And we'll be breaking that down in just a moment. So let's talk about the Mars Mahadasha first to kind of explain that a little bit. Mars is usually it's a very ambitious sort of Mahadasha, but it can be a difficult one because a lot of times you can be around people that are very competitive or grouchy or have Martian qualities. So it can be kind of a difficult mahadasha to navigate. So, and just a few more things. I forgot to bring this up. Hillary's a 3 life path, creative, 7 personal year, but she's going to be in an 8 personal year after her birthday. Okay, which is October 26th. So if she was, let's hypothetically say for some reason, she's somehow involved in this election, either as vice president or something, or as a potential VP. The 8 personal year is really, it's called a power year, so it's really good for that. She's Rohini Nakshatra, rising Nakshatra. They tend to be very ambitious. They have a love for comfort. They diligently go after their goals. They can be intuitive and emotionally sensitive. I know she's been criticized that in the past, that people thought she was a little bit stoic in her demeanor, or not seeming like she was caring about people. But Rohini, actually, they are actually intuitive. Maybe she just doesn't show it as well. She's a Taurus ascendant, so practical, reliable, patient, sensual, but very stubborn. Remember, with Taurus people, you can lock horns with them. So let's go ahead and talk about the Mars Mahadasha, which I was originally going to bring up. So the Mars Mahadasha, it's a shorter one than the Rahu Mahadasha that Kamala is in right now. So Mars is a really 7 years is actually very short in Vedic, the Vimshatari Dasha. So from November 2023, November 2030. So this is kind of just getting started. When you're in the first couple of years of a Mahadasha, it's kind of getting online. Now, Mars is all about energy, aggression, courage, strength, determination, leadership. So there's definitely can be a lot of ambition. Now, it's debilitated in her chart. That's the one problem. Remember, we said it was debilitated in the sign of Cancer. And this can cause actually issues. Okay, so for example, it's in the 3rd house of Hillary's chart. So there can be communication problems, a lot of stress, because the 3rd house can represent like the way you think, you're thinking, whether it's pessimistic or optimistic. Well, Mars being there, and then also Saturn's there. We're going to talk about that in a moment. So let's go ahead and pull up the chart for a moment so you all can see that. So Mars, it's there, it's debilitated, just like it is in Kamala's chart, by the way. Her Mars is debilitated, but it's with Saturn. Now, Prince William actually has this yoga of Mars and Saturn being together. What tends to happen with this yoga is Saturn has endurance, and then Mars doesn't want to give up. So these planets are kind of at odds with each other. So it can create somebody that has a tremendous amount of endurance and tenacity. So, I mean, these people they can like outlast a lot of people, in Hillary's case, it'd be like a political battle or something like that. She has a lot of tenacity. Mars is going to be activating this yoga right here with Mars and Saturn being together. But like I said, Mars is not, it's debilitated, and it's actually being oppressed by Saturn in a way. So I don't feel like the Mars period, and also it rules the 12th house, which has to do with losses, spirituality, and then the 7th house. Now, the 12th house isn't going to be strong either. But if you remember in the antardasha that Kamala's in, her 12th house is also being activated too. So the 12th house is usually more of a spiritual time. The one thing to point out is Mars is in the 5th house. If we look over here of the moon chart, the 5th house can represent politics. Now, the Mars dasha, and one more thing, sorry, let's talk about the 7th house. The 7th house could be a house where you get to some leadership. But I will say this overall, the Mars Mahadasha itself isn't very strong, except that it's going to give some sort of determination and maybe some like trying to ambition. Okay, so ambition is going to give, but the 7th house being activated, I don't think the Mahadasha is going to be exceptionally strong for bringing about leadership, but it can bring up conflict, and it can bring up somebody really battling to get to the top spot there. So that's one thing. The antardasha is going to be the more acute period. So let's go ahead and focus on the antardasha. Okay, so Mars is like, there's a lot of movement. There's a feeling of domination there, but it's not necessarily enough to propel somebody to like vice president or the presidency, or in making any type of move. Let's pull up the slide really fast. We talked about Mars conjunct Saturn. We talked about it rules the 12th house, the seventh house. Um, the seventh house, one thing I want to bring up in this slide is it is related to your career, even though people think of it as mostly the marriage house, which it is. But it is related to your career because it's 10th house from the 10th house using a principle called Bhavam. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the Rahu antardasha. Now, this is kind of interesting. She's in this Rahu antardasha April 2024, April 2025, April 2025, smack dab during this whole election season. Isn't that interesting? She's in this Rahu period. And remember, the Rahu period is actually, it's very acute. The energy is very focused right now. So the Mars is very ambitious. By the way, Rahu and Mars get along quite good. They can actually be a dynamic duo in a lot of ways because Rahu and Mars, they can be very ambitious in getting what they want. So let's go ahead and show you all in the chart really quickly here. So she's got Rahu in the first house, just like Hillary. I mean, sorry, Kamala. So Hillary's got it just like Kamala. This is all about advancing your social station, advancing your rank in life. There's a focus on the self. It can show that there was a focus on partners in past lives. So the soul is devoting more time to trying to, work on yourself in this current lifetime. Now, the one thing I want to point out is Rahu in Hillary's chart, it's in the nakshatra of Kritika. And the Kritika to me is like a leadership nakshatra. It even has this kind of like military leadership connotation to it. So it can be somebody that's, even though she's a Taurus, this could be somebody that has a lot of ambition. Kritika is a powerful nakshatra. It's known as the razor because it gets to the truth of things. So there's definitely a lot of ambition. What I can say about this period between April 2024 and April 2025 is there's a lot of ambition being activated by what's happening. Okay. So Rahu's always looking for an opportunity. So if Rahu sees an opening, Rahu's like, ooh, there's an opportunity for something. Now, the opportunity might not be president. She's already put her support behind Kamala, but there's definitely some sort of opportunity in this, whether it's like rising up the ranks of the Democratic Party, being vice president. There's several different options here, but there is, what I can say, there is, Rahu's definitely seeing this. Rahu's seeing there's an opportunity here with all of what's going on. So let's go ahead and put the slide back up for a second here. So remember, Rahu's very mysterious. It can catapult people to higher station. It can lead to power vacuums, unconventional, ambitious, disruptive. It can cause unpredictable things to happen. So between now, not just in the convention, but now and November, and I'm going to be talking about a transit where I think there's going to be a lot of drama, either an October surprise or something in the last quarter of 2024 that's going to shake up the world. Okay. So there's going to be a really intense transit at the end of the year here, which could be affecting all of the charts. Rahu's in the first house, just like we said with Kamala. Intense personality, ambitious and driven, desire for fame and power can all be associated with Rahu being in the first house. Now, let me go ahead and talk about the transits really quick that are kind of influencing this situation. So what I can say for sure is Rahu's definitely creating a sense of urgency and ambition, especially Mars and Rahu. There's a sense of urgency. Now, it could be that she's going to be enthusiastically campaigning for Kamala. That's a potential interpretation of this. But there is some sort of personal advancement when Rahu is when it's in the first house. There is some opportunity for the self or recognition or something along those lines. So let's talk about some of the transits. What I did notice is the Rahu Ketu transit that's happening. It's going through the 11th house and the 5th house, and then Rahu's actually going over the natal moon, which would be, in the moon chart, obviously it'd be in the first house. So there could be some opportunities there. In fact, when Rahu's going over your moon, it can actually create some sometimes it can create like impulsiveness. It can create like sudden moves, something where even the people around. It can make you unpredictable, essentially. I'm interrupting myself, but it can make you unpredictable. Like family members and friends, they might not even know what to make of you. And remember, we had the eclipses happen on April 8th or on April 8th and then March 25th. And then there's a second pair of eclipses that's happening right before the election. They're both going to be in the 11th and 5th houses. And then in the moon chart, the 1st and 7th houses. Now, the 11th house, just so you all know, that this has to do with politics. This can be political rallies, campaigns. So for sure, there's going to be some, well, not for sure, but there's going to be a lot of campaigning. There's going to be definitely a very strong interest in politics during this time with Rahu going in the 11th house. In fact, there could be a lot of fundraising activities going on around this time. So Rahu is definitely up to something. Remember, when you're running a mahadasha or an antardasha of a planet, that planet becomes, a lot stronger as a transiting planet. The other thing to point out is we got Saturn in the 10th house, which does show that there's a focus on the career right now. And keep in mind that Saturn is a good planet for Taurus ascendant because it rules the 9th house and the 10th house. So it's definitely assisting in the career. It's creating some obstacles, but it's creating some sort of opportunity with leadership responsibilities. The 10th house is essentially public responsibility and leadership opportunities. And we're almost at the end of the transit where we're going to see the final lessons coming out in this astrology chart. The other thing to point out, and this is the thing that's going to be affecting a lot of people's charts, okay, is around December, so November into December, this is going to be when we have Mars in the sign of Cancer, and it's going to go retrograde, but it's going to be slowing down for the month of November, and it's going to come to a standstill in the first week of December. So it's going to be at around 12 degrees of Cancer when it gets to a standstill for a few days. That's when a planet stations. It's happening right in the 3rd house of Cancer. And remember, Kamala has Mars in the sign of Cancer too. So, it's at 12 degrees. It's not exactly, it's not within 3 degrees, but it's definitely influencing these planets in here in this house. So there definitely could be some sort of, if I want to think about political earthquake towards the end of the year, I feel like something's happening, before, and this could be before September. There's a lot of, or sorry, December. There's a lot of instability in the world, and this particular transit with the Mars going retrograde is affecting a lot of world leaders' charts. And we got some conflict happening in the Middle East right now, and we got conflict happening in Eastern Europe. So definitely there, if something happens on the world stage, that could all definitely shake up things as well. Even the election, what's going on, it's not going to be an easy one with this transit, but it's definitely shaking up this planet. There's definitely a sense of conflict. Now, the other thing I want to point out about Hillary's chart is a lot of times we like to look at what is the Lord of Rahu, because the Rahu is going to act a lot like its Lord. Well, ruling planet is Venus. So Rahu's Lord is going to be Venus. It's in the 6th house of the astrology chart here, but it's in its own sign of Libra. So it's a very strong planet. Okay. But it is the first Lord too. So Rahu is the first Lord, and it's in Venus is in the 6th house. This can show somebody that knows how to deal with conflict quite well. She knows how to negotiate. She knows how to get people on her side. She's basically the ultimate diplomat. So definitely whatever's going on at this political convention and this last quarter of this year, we can definitely see there's a lot of negotiating different conflicts that are happening. In fact, she would actually be quite good at smoothing out a lot of conflicts with Venus in the 6th house. But Venus in the 6th house could also show that she's got, and she's got Sun and Mercury there. She's got a lot of enemies as well, because when you got planets in the 6th house, it can show enemies. She's also going to have to be careful, of course, about health with the 6th house being activated as well. So anyways, I do feel like there's definitely a lot of ambition happening in Hillary's chart. So Rahu in the 1st house, it can create a leadership vacuum. It can create someone getting some sort of position, whether that be as a vice president or leadership in the Democratic Party. There's definitely a feeling of some sort of ambitious event that's happening here. So let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. If you have some more charts that you want me to read in relation to the election or even the royal family, let me know down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.